There is clothing in the wash, not one piece, multiple pieces. A jacket, pants, lying in the same dry drainage channel that runs directly behind the house of Annie and Tomasso Guthrie. The same channel that had already swallowed a pair of pants weeks earlier. The same channel that law enforcement had been made aware of. And the same channel that official search operations somehow kept walking past without finding what a YouTuber with a camera found on his second trip in. The FBI has been notified, deputies are aware, the photographs are public, and the community that has been doing the work this investigation demands is asking one question louder than they have ever asked anything before. How is this possible? 60 days. 60 days since Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, a mother, a grandmother, a woman who deserved to grow old safely, vanished without a confirmed trace. And today, the answer to where she might have gone is sitting in a wash behind a house that has been at the center of this investigation since the very first morning. Beat. I need you to stay with me through every second of this video, because what is in that wash is only the beginning. The pattern behind it, and I mean the full pattern, everything this community has pieced together over 60 days, is what changes everything. And I'm saving the most important part for the end. Don't go anywhere. Everything you are about to hear is sourced. No speculation dressed up as fact. No rumors repackaged as breaking news. The clothing discovery is documented in a public post on X dated March 28, 2026. With photographs taken in place before anything was touched. Correct evidence protocol, followed by a civilian. The FBI notification is confirmed through community reporting and cross-referenced against the Pima County Sheriff's Department's own public communications. Expert voices cited in this video are named, credentialed, and on the record. Where something is unconfirmed, I will tell you it is unconfirmed. Where something is speculation, I will label it as speculation. This channel does not deal in anything else. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, reported missing on the morning of February 1, 2026, from a home in Tucson, Arizona. The call that launched this investigation came from Annie Guthrie, Nancy's daughter-in-law, the woman whose house backs up to a desert wash that is now at the center of everything. Annie's husband, Tomasso Guthrie, lives in that same home. 60 days later, there is no confirmed crime scene, no confirmed timeline, no publicly identified suspect, no surveillance footage that shows Nancy leaving, no vehicle anyone can place her in, no neighbor who saw her walking down a street in the dark. What there is, what has always been there, hiding in plain sight, is a dry riverbed, a wash, a natural drainage channel that runs behind Annie and Tomasso's property, invisible to cameras, invisible to streetlights, invisible to anyone who wasn't willing to get off the road and walk it on foot. On March 28, 2026, day 56 of the search, an independent content creator named Jim, known online as Exploring with Jim, walked that wash for the second time. And what he found changes the shape of every theory this community has been building since February. Let me be exact about what was found, because exactness is what this moment demands. On March 28, 2026, Exploring with Jim returned to the wash behind Annie and Tomasso Guthrie's house and discovered multiple items of clothing lying in the drainage channel. Based on photographs documented in a post on X by the account at Hope is Faith 24, photographs taken in place, undisturbed, exactly as they were found, those items appear to include a dark jacket and pants, multiple pieces, same wash, same geographic corridor that had already produced a prior discovery of pants weeks earlier. Jim did not move these items. He did not rearrange them. He photographed them exactly where they lay, in exactly the position they were found. And then he called the Pima County Sheriff's Department. That is the correct protocol. That is what responsible evidence handling looks like from a civilian who understands that the moment you disturb potential evidence, you may have destroyed the one thread that ties everything together. The sheriff was notified. Deputies were made aware. The FBI, which has been engaged in this investigation, has been brought into the picture. Now, here is where I need you to slow down with me, because the significance of this find is not just in the items themselves. It is in the location. The wash behind Annie and Tomasso's house is not a random stretch of desert. It is a specific drainage channel that connects directly to the backyard of the property that has been at the center of this investigation since the first morning. A wash, for anyone unfamiliar with Tucson and the Sonoran Desert, is a natural arroyo, dry most of the year, but carved deep into the landscape by decades of monsoon flooding. It runs through residential neighborhoods in ways that roads don't. It provides passage through terrain that no ring camera captures, no streetlight reaches it at night, no pavement holds a footprint, no neighbor's window frames it. It is, in investigative terms, a route that disappears from the evidentiary record almost the moment it is used. Jim has walked this wash before. The prior pants discovery, the one that first drew serious community attention to this drainage corridor, was also his find, also in the same channel, also behind the same property. And when the online investigative community saw him return to that same wash and come out with photographs of more clothing, the reaction was not excitement. It was something heavier than that. It was recognition. Because one find can be explained away. You know the arguments. It blew there. Someone dropped it walking through. It has nothing to do with the case. People make those arguments because the alternative is something they are not ready to sit with. But two finds, two separate dates, two separate trips into the same confined stretch of desert drainage channel directly behind the house of the woman who made the call that started this entire investigation. That is not an argument anymore. That is a location telling a story. And the story it is telling ends with one question that nobody in any official capacity has been willing to ask out loud. What was in that wash before Jim got there, and who put it there? I want you to understand something about this investigation before I lay out what I'm about to lay out. This is not a case where one strange thing happened. This is a case where strange things have been happening in the same direction, around the same geography, pointing toward the same property from the very first day. And when you stack them, when you actually put them side by side and refuse to look away, the weight of what you're looking at becomes very hard to carry. Start with what the community found first. Weeks before March 28th, a pair of pants was recovered from the wash behind Annie and Tomasso's house. The community surfaced this. Not an official press release, not a sheriff's department briefing, the community. It was documented, reported to law enforcement, and the public accounting of what happened to that report was incomplete at best. The pants went into the system, and the system went quiet. That is the first thread. Then comes the blood evidence. Community analysts, people watching footage frame by frame from their homes, identified what appeared to be donut-shaped blood drops consistent with a specific type of blood pattern, the kind that indicates blood falling from height onto a surface rather than spatter from impact. The forensic implications of that pattern were discussed in detail by this community long before any official forensic accounting was made public. Online investigator at Cheyenne, who has nearly 200,000 posts on X, and who is not someone who speculates carelessly, identified a University of Arizona athletics label in evidence footage and stated publicly she was confident enough in the identification to submit it to authorities. That find came entirely from community analysis of footage that was publicly available. Law enforcement did not surface it. That is the second thread. Then there is the geography itself. Former Pima County Chief Deputy Rick Castigar, a man who knows this department from the inside, spoke publicly and on the record about concerns with how this investigation was being approached. His concerns were specific. They were credible. They were documented. And they were directed at an institution that was, at the same moment, managing a formal no-confidence vote from within its own ranks. Not from critics, not from the media, from inside, from the people who work there. Former Sheriff Dr. Richard Carmona, who held this exact job before the current administration and who carries the additional credibility of being a former United States Surgeon General, publicly stated that the crime scene in this case had been permanently corrupted. Pause. Permanently. Not compromised, not damaged in ways that might still be recoverable. Permanently corrupted. Those words came from a man of that standing, directed at this institution, in this case, and they have never been satisfactorily answered. That is the third thread. Now, pull them together. Community finds pants in the wash behind Annie and Tomasso's house. Community identifies blood pattern evidence before official forensic communication. D. Community identifies a label in evidence footage. A former chief deputy goes on record with concerns. A former U.S. Surgeon General says the crime scene is permanently corrupted. A no-confidence vote is registered by the department's own personnel. And then, on day 56, Jim walks back into that same wash and finds more clothing in the same place. This is the pattern. 1 incident can be dismissed. 2 is harder. 3 begins to feel like direction. 4, 5, 6, all pointing at the same property, the same geography, the same failure to publicly account for what official resources found versus what civilians surfaced. That is not coincidence. That is a case telling you where to look. And right now, as every thread in this investigation runs through a drainage channel behind a house on the outskirts of Tucson, where an 84-year-old woman was last seen alive. When findings like this emerge in an active missing persons case, when a second clustering of physical evidence appears in a defined geographic location that has already yielded a prior find, there is a standard for how a law enforcement agency with its full institutional resources should respond. They should respond immediately. They should deploy deputies to the site. They should physically examine the location, document it independently, bag and label every item, enter everything into evidence, and cross-reference the new find against the prior discovery in the same corridor. They should loop in the FBI. They should issue a public acknowledgement that the find is being investigated, not a full briefing, not case-compromising detail, but enough to confirm to a watching public and a searching community that the report was received and is being taken seriously. That is what accountability looks like. That is what transparency looks like. That is what a functioning institution that respects the people doing work on behalf of a missing woman looks like. Here is what the Pima County Sheriff's Department has publicly communicated about the March 28th find, about the clothing in the wash, about the pattern of evidence clustering behind Annie and Tomasso Guthrie's house. Silence. Not a statement, not a briefing update, not a confirmation that deputies responded, not a word about whether the items were collected. D. Whether they were sent for forensic analysis, whether the FBI was briefed, or whether the prior pants discovery and the March 28th find are being treated as the cluster they are. Silence from an institution that already has a no-confidence vote on the record. Silence from a department whose own former leadership has publicly raised concerns about how this case is being handled. Silence while the family of an 84-year-old woman waits, while a community of investigators does the work that official resources have consistently failed to produce publicly, and while clothing lies in a wash behind the house of the woman who made the call on the morning Nancy disappeared. The contrast between what accountability requires and what this institution has delivered does not need me to explain it. You already feel it. This silence is not new. That is the thing I need you to understand. If this were the first time the Pima County Sheriff's Department had failed to publicly account for how it handled community-sourced information in this case, it would be one thing. But this is not the first time. And the record of those failures tells us something important about what we should expect now. Go back to early February. The initial search operations in the days immediately following Nancy's disappearance were widely criticized by community investigators and by people with direct knowledge of search methodology as insufficient. The terrain around Annie and Tomasso's property, including the wash, was not covered with the kind of systematic foot-by-foot discipline that a missing persons case in this geography demands. The wash that Jim has now searched twice, productively twice, was a known feature of the property from day one. It is directly behind the house. It is a documented drainage corridor. And yet, the finds in that corridor came not from official operations, but from a YouTuber walking it alone. That is a procedural failure. It is documented by the outcomes. Then there is the communication failure. Former Chief Deputy Castigar did not speak out in a vacuum. He spoke out because what he was observing from the outside, the public-facing management of this investigation, did not reflect how a case of this nature should be handled. His concerns about transparency, about the pace and discipline of the investigation, were specific and on the record. And they came from someone who had spent his career inside the institution he was critiquing. That is not a partisan attack. That is institutional accountability from someone with standing to deliver it. Then there is what Dr. Carmona said, permanently corrupted. Think about what those two words mean together in a forensic context. A crime scene that is permanently corrupted cannot be rehabilitated. Evidence that was there and was not collected or was damaged in place is gone. The window to recover it, to document it, to build the forensic foundation that nobody homicide cases require, that window does not reopen. When a former United States Surgeon General, speaking about a case in the jurisdiction he once led, chooses those specific words, he is not being careless. He is being precise. The permanent corruption of a crime scene is a failure so serious that it changes what is possible in an investigation. It narrows the path to accountability. It may foreclose certain avenues of prosecution entirely, and it happened in this case, according to someone who should know, before the first month was out. Now the clothing is in the wash. Again. Second documented find. Same location, same channel. And the institution that permanently corrupted the crime scene, that failed to systematically search the terrain in the first days, that issued no confidence internally, that has been publicly challenged by its own former leadership, that institution has been notified. Retired FBI Special Agent Steve Moore has spoken publicly about cases like this one. He has described the investigative technique of working backward from physical evidence, tracing the most probable path from discovery point to origin point using terrain, timing, and conditions to build a directional picture of what happened. Two data points in the same confined corridor, he has said in the context of similar cases, produce a directional conclusion that is very hard to walk back from. The direction those data points are pointing has not changed. It has only become harder to ignore. Her name is Nancy Guthrie. She is 84 years old. She had a morning routine. She had a chair where she sat. She had a family that knew the sound of her voice and the particular way she moved through her own house. She had a daughter-in-law who made a phone call on the morning of February 1st to report her missing. A call that set off 60 days of searching, of waiting, of community investigators walking desert terrain under a Tucson sun because the alternative was doing nothing. And doing nothing was something no one who cared about Nancy Guthrie was willing to accept. Savannah Guthrie, Nancy's daughter, one of the most recognized journalists in American television, has stood in front of cameras and said things that people with information say when they are managing something private and devastating in public. She has carried the weight of this visibly, and she returns to the Today Show on April 6th. Everything that has surfaced in that wash, the clothes, the pattern, the questions, will be in the room with her when she does. Nancy Guthrie is not a case file. She is a person. And she is still missing. This video is produced for informational and educational purposes only. Every claim made is sourced to publicly available documentation, photographs posted on X on March 28, 2026, on-record statements from named credentialed sources, and verified reporting from mainstream outlets. No individual has been named or implied as a suspect in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie in this video or anywhere on this channel. When this video references Annie and Tomasso Guthrie's property in connection with the evidence found in the wash, it does so because the geographic facts are documented and publicly established. Proximity is not accusation. A location that has produced multiple clothing finds is a location that demands investigative attention. That is the argument this video makes, and it goes no further than that. If you have information related to the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department tip line or the Tucson FBI field office directly. Here is the question that no official has asked publicly. Not the sheriff, not the FBI field office, not the Pima County Board of Supervisors, who have every reason and every institutional standing to demand an accounting of how this investigation has been conducted. The question is this: if a civilian, a YouTuber with a camera and a pair of boots, can return to a wash twice and find clothing both times in the drainage corridor directly behind the most significant property in this investigation, then what did official search operations find when they swept that terrain in the first days? And if the answer is nothing, why? Because those are not the same question. Finding nothing and finding nothing when something was there are two completely different things. One means the evidence wasn't there yet. The other means something went wrong in the search, in the methodology, in the resources committed, in the seriousness with which a drainage channel behind a key property was treated in the critical early window of an active missing persons case. Nobody in authority is asking that question on the record. The Board of Supervisors is not asking it. The State Attorney General's office is not asking it. The local media, with a few exceptions, is not pressing for the answer with the persistence the situation demands. But this community is asking it. And the community has been right about this case before. Right about the wash, right about the blood pattern, right about the label in the footage, right in ways that forced official acknowledgement and institutional response. The wash behind Annie and Tomasso's house is speaking. The clothing in it is a sentence in a language that forensic science was built to translate. Nancy Guthrie deserves that translation. Her family deserves it. And the institution that was entrusted with delivering it needs to be watched closely enough that the failure to deliver becomes impossible to hide. The question is out there now. It will not go back into the wash. If Nancy Guthrie matters to you, share this video. Not for the algorithm, for her. The more people watching this case, the harder it becomes for the people responsible for answering these questions to stay silent. Subscribe so you're here when Savannah Guthrie returns to the Today Show on April 6th, because what she says, knowing what has been found in that wash, will matter. And I will cover it in full the moment it happens. See, one question for the comments. Do you believe the Pima County Sheriff's Department has treated the wash behind Annie and Tomasso's house with the seriousness it deserves? And if not, what should happen next? Nancy Guthrie is still missing. We are still watching. This script is produced for informational and educational purposes only. All information is based on publicly available sources. No individual has been named or implied as a suspect. If you have information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, please contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department or the Tucson FBI Field Office.